Training to be a street cop.
Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the Street Cop Training Podcast. I am your host, founder and CEO of Street Cop Training. My name is Dennis Benino, and with me today we have the infamous Maryland legend himself, Tom Stack. Tom Stack is an instructor with Street Cop Training and teaches human sex trafficking, amongst other topics, in the field of all sorts of things that we're talking about today, between prostitution and trafficking human beings and modern day slavery. And I'm sure that I'm leaving a lot of stuff out, but Tom can be the person to explain it to you. So appreciate you being here today, Tom, finding time to give us some value at the law enforcement community. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Dennis. I don't know about all the infamous and the legend, that type of stuff. You know, I'm just a regular cop, or actually retired cop, but always prided myself as just being a regular police.
What are you doing now? What's your position now outside of being associated with this company?
When I'm not my full-time job, I'm the human trafficking coordinator for the mayor's office. So I basically run all human trafficking in the Baltimore City, the anti-trafficking coordination in the city of Baltimore. I'm co-chair of the Human Trafficking Collaborative there, which I founded. Basically, I started back in 2017 with a city councilman up there. So before I got there, they had really nothing. I mean, it was the pits. They had no coordination of anything going on. So I basically built a task force there in the city of Baltimore, we've done some pretty cool stuff and some pretty amazing stuff. And I'm also co-chair of the Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force Training Committee. So we do some law enforcement training here in the state of Maryland as well.
Awesome, man. And, where do you think the best place to start? Maybe trying to give some statistical data or some background. Well, let's go with background on yourself to begin with. So let's talk about your career, what you did, and how you came into this focus of going into and focusing on human trafficking. And that encompasses a lot of sub chapters of what encompasses human trafficking.
Yeah, if you would have asked me back in 1988, like, hey, Stack, what do you want to do when you're in your law enforcement career? The human trafficking would have never even. First of all, it wasn't even a word. So human trafficking would have not even been on the radar. So I started my law enforcement career actually as a correctional officer back in 1986. Because back then I wanted to be a cop. I'd always wanted to be a cop all through high school, and even when I was running from the police, I always wanted to be the police.
I feel like the best cops are the ones that ran from the cops. You know what I mean?
And the ones that got away, right?
You know what I'm saying? Like, and people don't know that, but it's very comical when you're looking in the rank and file of the 100 to 200 to 300 people that you work with, and you're like, man, the shit me and this guy used to do over there, right?
Yeah.
And I can't even go into the details of it. Like, I may have received narcotics from people that I worked with at times as a kid in high school, and now we were all narcotics guys together. It's very funny.
Because I knew what I wanted to do, but getting on the police department was extremely difficult back in the late 80s. You had 750, 800 people applying for 35 positions. It's not like it is now. So it was extremely competitive. So in order to give myself a leg up, I actually got a job as a correctional officer, which actually was really good because I kind of came out on the streets not as naive, because I was dealing with convicts and inmates for a year and a half and listening to their bullshit and their scams and all that stuff. But I did that for a year and a half, and I got hired my first go around with the police department in Montgomery County, Maryland, just outside Washington, D.C. It's a large jurisdiction. I spent all 26 years there. It's a large county of about 550 square miles and over 1 million people. And the department is about 1,200 sworn. So I spent my first 6 years of my career in patrol. I didn't want to leave patrol until I had at least 5 years. I didn't think, you need to do at least 5 years in patrol just to kind of, get yourself, get your feet wet and get figured out. And actually, which was great because I actually patrolled the neighborhood in the district that I grew up in. And it was very advantageous to me because I knew where I used to run. So I used to be able to head the bad guys off at the pass because I knew where all the cut throughs were. I knew where all the stuff was. So I did that for about 6 years, and I actually loved patrol. I flourished in patrol and did well. And my theory in patrol is, if you want to make the great play, you have to be in the game. So if you're sitting at 7-Eleven on midnight for half your shift reading magazines, you're not doing anything.
Oh, they did that there too? That sounds super familiar. They did that there too?
Oh yeah.
Because that sounds super familiar to think.
Yeah. We had guys sleeping.
I work with.
We had guys sleeping the whole midnight shift in the firehouse and stuff, I mean, those guys never did anything. Those guys were, career patrolmen and never did a damn thing in their career. But, I wanted to be out there doing stuff. So I was pounding the pavement, making things happen. So I went from there to a street crimes unit. Within each district in our department, each district station had a special assignment team, which was a sergeant, a corporal, and 6 plainclothes officers that would basically go and attack crime areas within the district. And sometimes you would work with other districts, and you're doing everything from robberies, auto thefts, drugs, breaking into cars, burglaries, from everything from soup to nuts. And you're working primarily evenings, night work, doing that all day, and then court all day. It was awesome. It was like hide and seek. It was like or hunting. Like if you like to hunt, you would love doing this because you'll sit down on a stakeout all day waiting for something to happen. But when it goes down, the shit's it's awesome. There's nothing like watching a crime go down in like right in front of your face, especially a felony.
Yeah.
So my kids were getting a little bit older. I wanted to start coaching, so I was starting to look to trying to transition to a day work position. So I applied for a position in our Vice and Intelligence section. Our department was not known for much of Vice of anything. It was more intel because of our proximity to DC. We had a huge, intel unit that worked with MPD, because we had a lot of protests. I mean, you work down DC, so you know what it's like with all the protests and all the crap that goes on around.
It's so interesting. I remember working in DC in that area, and where I came from in New Jersey. And even to this day, there's a lot of respect for law enforcement. And maybe somebody who works in an area where they're feeling that, they may beg to differ, but it's just the truth. You were almost like a celebrity in the town that I grew up with, Goodman Agency, where that's where I worked. You were like a celebrity if you were a cop, and you wouldn't mess with the police. As a matter of fact, they couldn't do enough for you. And then I worked in DC, and you were basically a fucking janitor. I mean, they treated the cops like shit. The cops treated each other like shit. I'm like, this is crazy. And that was 2004.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that certainly has progressed. And I just couldn't believe the disrespect at that time they had for law enforcement, that liberal ass nut job town that place is. They're out of their minds there.
Yeah.
And that's just constantly facilitated by political agendas. And let's face facts, the politics down there, they think they're all above at least giving other human beings respect. But I actually can give compliments to, at least once you started getting into Maryland, it seemed to improve a little bit. Especially with the way that places like Montgomery County and PG County, which we worked hand in hand with, handle business. They were just far more ready to be the police than a lot of agencies in Washington D.C. were. Anyway,
just to get on our department, you needed a bachelor's or AA degree just to apply, and in most cases, you need a bachelor's degree just to be competitive. So it was.
Is that still the same now?
Yeah, it's still the same. Yeah, believe it or not, they still have those requirements.
I mean, I find that interesting. I got a funny feeling some of those requirements are going to be dismantled, especially with the struggle to recruit. And I honestly think they're a little ridiculous because I got to tell you, I don't have a college degree, and I think I'm a prime example of. I know people that have master's degrees in criminology and criminal justice that, it's just different. It's a different path that I know we have a lot of time together, but I'm just at a position of how I feel about college. It's neither here nor there about college. Let's go back to more about you.
Yeah. I applied for a position in the Vice Intelligence section, which is in our Special Investigations Division, which houses our narcotics and our repeat offenders and all that fun stuff. So I actually got applied for and I got the position. So I left the special assignment team, which was like, you're running all the time, very proactive, always locking somebody up like every night, out looking, doing stuff, to a unit that was like basically sat on their hands. When I got there, I almost left. It was miserable. I was doing some of the intel stuff. We had a guy who was already doing the massage parlors. We had another guy that was doing, something else. And, so I was trying to do some of the intel stuff. One of the things that we did in that office is Montgomery County is famous for the DC sniper. If you remember the DC sniper case.
Oh yeah.
Were you working in DC during that time?
No. You know what? It was close. I might have either left already. What year was that?
I want to say it was around 2000 and maybe 2001 or 2002. It was.
Yeah. So it was before my time. I got there in 04.
Okay.
Just like similar to you, I started my career in 01 in corrections. But at the end of 01, it was in October of 01. And then I had moved to Park Police in April 4th of 2004. So I had missed that and living in that dynamic. But I think a lot of the trials were going on at that time. And I remember thinking about, or somebody pointing out to us, this was one of those gas stations where somebody was killed.
Yeah, the first day of all the homicides, the big day when they killed the most people was actually about a mile from where I grew up. I mean, I used to hang out in the shopping centers where they killed all those people. So we worked on that, and because I had a surveillance background, they assigned me to the repeat offender section, which we were following like really good bona fide leads. That they ended up not being the sniper, but it was just very, very disheartening when you're following this guy around and you're like, this guy could be this could be the sniper, this could be the guy. And then, you hear on the radio, oh, there was a shooting over in Virginia. We're like, oh shit, well, drop this guy. Let's go find somebody else. So I worked that case. A lot of people in our department worked that case. And actually the night that they caught the snipers, I was actually up in the command center sorting through leads, watching all the feds fight over who was going to try and be the person who got hands on. It was actually pretty interesting. So I got really bored up there. And about that time, we had a guy who was doing the massage parlor investigations. He kind of got in a little bit of trouble. He actually had a buddy of his was signed up as an CI. And he was sending them into the massage parlors and giving them money to go in there, and he would go in there and have sex with the girls and come back and then report what happened. Then my buddy would go get a search warrant, and then we go hit the place and take out $30,000. And once the state's attorney's office found out about it, and then the Washington Post found out about it, they said, "Hey, Stack, you're doing the massage parlor investigations now." So I did it the right way. We had about 26 massage parlors.
He get a little slap on the wrist on that one, or he got like a real one up the keister?
Nah, he just got a little slap on the wrist. He actually went to the JTTF, and then and then he was out. He was working with the FBI all the time as a TFO and with the JTTF.
I mean, let's face facts. The administration knew what he was doing. He was writing the reports on it, right? Only until there was some exposure on it that he now bared the burden of having to take it across the chin himself.
I went when they gave me the assignment to do all the massage parlors, because when I started, I had 26 massage parlors, the Korean run massage parlors in Montgomery County. And it took me about 3 years to get rid of them all. So I just, was going in there, human trafficking wasn't a word. So I was just going in there. I was locking everybody up. I was basically financially ruining these massage parlors. I would shut them down for weeks on end on violations of their permits. And, I was just, like I said, just financially squeezed them. And then one of the massage parlor owners actually started to bribe me. She thought I was a dirty cop. And, so she was paying me money. So we worked that for a summer, and we locked her up. And she was like the last one, that last of the Mohicans, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And we finally got rid of her and locked her up.
What kind of person was she?
She thought she was smarter than me. And she thought she was smarter than everybody. But she wasn't a horrible person. She, I think that's just the way things are done. In
Korea.
Yeah. I think
so it's a norm over there. But is it a norm over there to have like prostitution and all that stuff, and that they think it's like a just regular part of having a job?
I don't know. I've never been to Korea, so I really can't speak on it. She didn't act like anything was what she was doing was anything wrong.
Was she tied to organized crime, or just a solo
not
flyer?
That I know of. She was one of the ones that we thought she was kind of a single person. She was out there running this Shady Grove Gym and Spa was the name of it. And I actually do a little case study during my human sex trafficking class. And I got a couple pictures and stuff like that. It was an interesting case. It was a lot of fun, to be honest with you.
Did she actually like engage in things, or she was just running it?
She was running it. She owned it. She ran it. She bought a $46,000 BMW. This is back in like 2003. So it's a lot of money. And she paid for it in cash. And she paid, well, basically, $40,000 of it was in $20 bills. She walked in there with a big bag of cash. That's a lot of hand jobs.
Yeah, you ain't kidding. and where was she like these? And again, I guess you're deep diving a little bit into this type of questions about it. The people that they recruited, the girls that they recruited, were they forced into, or are they voluntary? And are they ever voluntary?
You know what? I think with the Korean massage, a lot of them at first are forced into it. Through debt bondage, that costs them so much money to get into the United States, and then they have to work it off, and it takes them forever and ever and ever to work them off. And then when they get older, they're not really making any money, and so they might release them from their debt bondage. Back when I was doing massage parlors, we never heard of human trafficking. No one knew anything about human trafficking. It was before that term was made available to me to put that tool in my toolbox. So I was just doing what I was told to do, and I was told to go out and get rid of these massage parlors. And and I was, like I said, I came from a very proactive unit. I was doing these things all the time. I was locking up these places and shutting them down, and I was sending teletypes out because my buddies would come up to me that were in patrol. They're like, "God damn, Stack, V&I is actually doing work now. You're out there, you're killing it." And it's like, hey, I wouldn't mind coming up and doing a temp in that unit. I said, yeah, it's a lot of fun. So it was interesting. I think a lot of those girls, like I said, may not be trafficking victims. They may have been trafficking victims at one time before they got here. They all work out of Flushing, New York. They all come out of Flushing, and if you put paper on them, a lot of times they'll go back to Flushing and they disappear. You'll never see them again because they're not going to show up. Right.
So, and I guess, they don't want to. Why do they have to come back, right?
Right. Well, it's interesting because the Koreans have been pushed out. The Koreans don't run the massage parlors anymore. It's the Chinese. The Chinese are running them. And the same thing out of Flushing, New York. And people go up there and they just disappear. They disappear.
Do you think that in any of these establishments, if it's voluntary, what's the kind of compensation these girls are receiving as compared to what the house is getting on things?
Well, the girls are getting the tips. So the house is getting the $60 for the massage, or how much it is. If it's 50, 60, 80, $100, they're getting the house money for the massage. And then the girls are keeping the tips. So
that's typical.
Yeah.
And then they can do they have a life outside of this facility that they're being forced or voluntarily going into? Because it seems like these things are open from early morning to late night.
Yeah. A lot of them sleep in there. A lot of the ones, and that's how we shut a lot of these places down is because they were breaking their permits. They have a use and occupancy permit, and they're not allowed to sleep in there, not allowed to use it for a residential place. So we would use that to shut their place down and pull their permits. And that's like I said, we financially just squeezed them all out, and they all left. The people the cops over in Northern Virginia are still pissed off at me because that's where most of them went when they left Montgomery County. They were going to set up shop somewhere else. They just got tired of losing money.
Has it resurfaced in Montgomery County since you left?
Yeah, it has. And like I said, the Chinese have taken over. But it's not so. I talked to my boys still in the unit down there, and it's not so much. They're just doing legal massages. There's really not a lot of sex acts going on. When I first started doing it, it was the full Monty. You could get everything, and then it went to pretty much just hand jobs, and then the old happy ending. That's what we call those places, rub and tugs.
Why did they go to that? Did they think the cops would be less interested if it was just that?
Yeah. Yep. And they weren't going to get locked up for prostitution or human trafficking. But now there's labor trafficking, so it's still going on. But then now you look at the labor trafficking angle on it, where they're still forced to do it, even though they're not performing a sex act. There's no commercial sex involved. There's still that forced labor.
Oh God, I had a question. I just lost track. You continue on. I'll see if I can circle back around to that question.
Okay. So once I shut all those places down, I was looking for my next hobby. go out to do something. And I got into Latino brothels. Montgomery County and Prince George's County, as you know, from living down there, has a rather large immigrant population of Latinos living in the Wheaton, Silver Spring, Langley Park area of Montgomery County, Prince George's County. So then we started to investigate these brothels that were going on, and I'll be honest with you, that's where I really first saw the exploitation that was going on. And in these brothels, I mean, they're very cookie cutter. It was almost like playing whack-a-mole, that stupid game at the arcade where you're trying to hit the daggone mole with the hammer. And that's what we were doing with these brothels. We would shut a brothel down, and then another one pop up across the parking lot. And then we shut that one down. And then another one pop up, an apartment complex next to it. They're always in apartment complexes or like townhouses, but they're always in heavy Latino neighborhoods because that's all their clientele. That's the only clientele. I can never do UC work.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Was that being catered to strictly the Latino community? Strictly,
100%. I had an informant. He was a LSAL guy, and he was ex-MS-13 guy. He was like the best informant I ever had. He was amazing. He got me more search warrants and then brothels than anybody. So we got.
Let me ask you this. So why did he work with you? Is he working off charges, or he just liked doing the work after he flipped the script?
I think once he flipped the script, he kind of liked doing the work. And we would pay him. Pay him like $50. Back then, I mean, I tried to keep it under $50 because I didn't want to write a bunch of other memos. And he was happy with it. I'd go in there and he'd go into the brothel. He'd go in there and say, "You got the girls?" And they're like, "Yeah." Like, "How much?" $30. Okay. And then he'd go, "No, I don't like those girls. I'm looking for Dominicans." And he would leave, and they would come out and give me the information. I would give him $40. I would make sure he had no money when he walked in the door. I didn't want him doing what my buddy did.
Yeah.
And so what my boy did after he got the $40, I don't know, because we were basically telling him where all the brothels were. He may have gone, who knows? But he was a great informant. And then we go get a search warrant and we banged the door. But we got tired of playing whack-a-mole, and so we started digging a little bit deeper and started to understand a little bit more about the organization, because these places, if you look at them, they look real cookie cutter. I mean, there's a couple mattresses sewn on the ground, nightstand with the rubbing alcohol, paper towels, and some condoms, and it's real simple.
What's the rubbing alcohol for?
You gotta remember, most of their clientele, they're out mulching yards, cutting grass, building decks, to clean up a little bit before they
really
put the condom on.
Oh, okay, all right.
So yeah, that's what we were told.
Never thought of that.
We never saw it in action, but that's what we were told.
You know what, Tom? I guess the reason I never thought of that is because my balls never got that bad. You know what I mean?
I'm glad to hear that, Dennis.
Yeah. I just, and it's, I guess
I've never used it either.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never, and I got to imagine, that might hurt if it's, I don't know.
Especially if you had an open sore.
Oh, well, I don't got one of those.
If you had an open sore, then they'd probably giving those $30 back and going back. Oof. So it was $30 for 15 minutes, and it's vaginal intercourse only. And you're thinking, oh shit, they can't be making that much money.
Oh, so forget it.
We started investigating these places and digging into them a little bit. And we found a family that was operating. So we started pulling through search warrants. We started getting the landlord, the lease agreements and the utility bills. And we started seeing this name called Yolanda Aparicio started popping up all over the place. And so we started looking into her, and then it was about an 18-month investigation between our office, the FBI, and it was ICE back then, which before they turned over to HSI. It was about an 18-month investigation, and we got into the weeds on these places, and we realized that the pimps and the traffickers are not here in Montgomery County. They're all in New York. They all live in Queens or over in Union City, New Jersey, because that's where the girls were being picked up. And so we realized through our investigation how actually organized these places are. So the pimps up in New York had a bunch of girls working for them, and they basically said, okay, here's a list of brothels, go find work. So it was their responsibility. And they worked in these brothels at a week at a time. So you could be in Montgomery County this week, and you can be in New Jersey next week, and you could be in Boston. New York was the hub, anywhere from Boston down to Richmond, Virginia, and anywhere in between. So they worked on a weekly basis. They were never in the same brothel for more than a week. So it was a great investigation. We did a lot of hard work, and we found out that the Aparicio was making about $1.3 million a year, working all her brothels.
Wow.
And she was never in them. All the surveillance we did on her, we saw her in a brothel one time. And
wow.
yeah. And I think you can still hear me.
Yeah, I can. Yep. I just getting a little hot in here.
So that's 1.3 million that we found out that she got, but there's a 50-50 split between the brothel and the girl who was working at the brothel. So each, there was $15 to go. And I go into pretty deep during my class as I kind of go into the weeds and show some pictures of what the things look like, and GPS trackers of how they go around. So 1.3 million went to the Aparicio, 1.3 million went to the pimps up in New York. $2.6 million a year. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. And I'm sure they're not filing federal tax returns on that, right?
Last I checked, they had, but I'll if you need me to, I'll look back into it. But no, we found that they keep ledgers. So the girls average having sex anywhere from 15 to 25 guys a day.
Wow.
The most we ever saw in one day was 55.
Wow.
He had sex with 55 guys in one day.
And they're getting money out of this. They're actually taking some money for themselves too.
They get nothing. All the money they make goes to their pimp in New York, because the pimps call down to the brothel owners and say, "Hey, how much did my girl make?" She made $2,000. Well, if she comes back up with $1,500 because she stuck $500 down her bra, she's going to get her ass kicked. She's going to get beaten. These girls, like I said, this is where I really saw the exploitation, and this is when human trafficking, the term human trafficking, started to come out, and I started to understand it and see it and talk to these girls. Unfortunately, because Policia in their country is corrupt, they're bad. Sometimes they're the reason they've been trafficked in the first place.
Wow.
And we heard some horrific stories of some of the stuff that's been done to these girls. Threats to kill family, threats to kill, your brother, your sister, threats to kill them if they don't continue to do it. And these girls believe it. Threats to call ICE. We're going to deport you. We're going to shame you. We're going to tell everybody back in your town, your village, that you're a prostitute. Which would devastate these folks, especially because from a strict, mostly Catholic religion down there in Central America, Mexico, and
how do they get caught up in this stuff? How does that happen? What's the initial?
Well, there's different ways. One girl we got. Most of the girls we came in contact with would not cooperate with us. We offered them all the services you can imagine, but they want nothing to do with us because they think we're bad. So a lot of them we actually deported because we looked at it two ways. We can put them into working with ICE or HSI and have them deported, or they go back out on the street and they're going to go right back to an old brothel having sex with 50 guys a day. What's the lesser of two evils?
Mm-hmm.
So we actually,
you're almost saving them, deporting them. That was the idea.
Yeah. And then also when they were in deportation proceedings, we could also send victim advocates in there to try and get them to talk. And if they actually said, reveal their victimization, then we can try and pull them out of, deportation proceedings.
How often did that occur?
Not very often.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Yeah. Like I said, it was like shooting spitballs at a battleship, trying to get these girls to cooperate. So there was this one girl, she talked to us and she said that she lived in a village in Mexico and she lived a normal life. It was a poor village. And in walks the guy one day, had, nice hair, nice teeth, well-groomed, nicely dressed, flashing cash. Well, he started to date her. And so he dated her and then, a couple weeks, a month go by, she falls in love with the guy. And he says, listen, I said, we want to go back to the United States. I'm from the United States. Let's go back. So he smuggles her across the United States to get back to New York. And he basically says, you need to do this.
Wow.
And basically she did it for about a week or two. That's what she told us. She did it for about a week or two. And then she said, you know what? I'm not doing it anymore. Screw you. I'm out. And he goes, if you don't do it, I'm going back to Mexico. I'm going to murder your mother, your father, your brother, and your sister. And I'll be back across the border before they find their bodies. And she knew he had the means to do it. So she continued to prostitute under that coercion for.
And was it true? Would they ever carry things like this out if they did refuse?
Well, what happened is she had enough, and she said, "Go ahead, kill my family. I'm not doing it anymore. I can't do it anymore." And she left him, and he went back to Mexico, and nothing happened to her family. He came back with another girl. He just ran the same scam on another girl.
Wow. I mean, it's just wild, man.
It's just sad for her that she ended up back in the network, because she's here illegally. She didn't realize that she has rights, that she could have exercised some rights to get a visa, like a T visa, and stayed here and gotten a green card and gotten continuing residence and stayed here in the United States, and eventually become a citizen if she wanted to. But she could have worked, but she didn't know that, and she went back into the life, because she kept all the money she made, but she was back doing what she was doing because that's all she really had to do. And she had a whole notebook full of names and addresses of where the brothels were.
Oh, wow. So she did it on her own?
Yeah. So she did it on her own to make money. I don't know ever what happened to her. I mean, when we got her, she was actually a victim of a robbery, because these places get robbed all the time. MS-13 is like terrorizing the shit out of these places.
Even the Chinese ones now?
MS-13 is only extorting the Latino brothels.
Okay. So
yeah, they don't mess with the Chinese. They don't mess with the Chinese massage parlors.
The Chinese mafia, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't mess with those guys.
Yeah, they're going to come for you, right?
Yeah. And then they don't. They get you. So that was pretty much what we did with the Latino brothels. So we hammered them really hard here. So we kind of shut them all down. And about that time, I was looking for my next adventure, because the brothels were all pretty much drying up, and they were all moved over into Prince George's County, over in Langley Park and Hyattsville, over that way. So about that time is when the internet started to blow up with prostitution. I was doing stings. I was still doing like brothel raids with the Asian brothels. We're still advertising the city paper and the classified sections, and every 2 weeks I'd go by this store and get one of the papers and, just start calling all the numbers and making dates and going, doing that, doing that stuff. But then the internet started to blow up, with Craigslist, and Craigslist started to hit it. And that's when I went to a couple of human trafficking classes. And I started to train myself up on human trafficking, and started to do cases. And I remember I did my first juvenile prostitution case. And I knew nothing about it. I mean, as far as like her being a prostitute, now I realize that juveniles can't be prostitutes. They're victims of crime. Sure. By federal law, by state law, but the law was still in the books. So the first juvenile I ever came in contact with, I arrested and charged for prostitution. And I locked up her pimp and seized, he had some dope on him. And I just charged him for like the dope and seized all his money. And that was it. But I quickly learned after I did that case that I fucked it up. And I didn't do it anymore. I never charged another juvenile that I came across during my doing sting operations. I treated them as victims, and because they are, I mean, that was a 16-year-old girl at the time. I've come across 13-year-old girls. 13 is the youngest I ever came in contact with.
How does a girl at 13 end up in this disaster situation?
Well, there was two cases that our office did around the same time with 13-year-olds. One was a runaway, and actually talk about her in my during the training that I do for street cops is like I talk about this 13-year-old girl, and how this case got screwed up by another jurisdiction, and how I resurrected it like 4 or 5 years later, and using the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and their age progression to go out and find this girl 5 years after she was victimized. And so we actually did the case and locked the pimp up. And I don't know if you saw my posting the other day on Facebook of the pimp who got 21 years. That was him. So wow. He ended up getting, after the case was completely botched and screwed up, he reared his ugly head in Montgomery County, and I found him at the Red Roof Inn because the front desk guy tipped me off that he was there. And because I used to make nice with all the front desk people all throughout the county. They all know me. They probably still know me, the ones that are still there. And tipped me off to this guy. But that 13-year-old was out there. She was a runaway and got scooped up by a pimp.
How did they find these girls?
Various ways that they troll for them. She might have been hanging out at the subway or at the metro. There was one girl, a 16-year-old girl that I did a case with. She was picked up at a metro because that's where they congregate. That's where they have nowhere to go. What's a runaway do during the day is where a pimp is going to go.
Wow. It's wild, dude.
Shopping malls.
We live in like hearing stories like this, I think it really puts context in people's minds of, one, how fortunate we are as human beings to be in the positions that we're in. So I want to remind everybody who's listening to this, the next time you complain about anything, think about what your life could have been. And you have the right to complain about some stuff, but give yourself some perspective. And then you think about the things that are going on constantly all day long. And, you can try to rack your brain around how much crime is actually occurring. But then when you start getting into things like this, where it really starts to hit home, and I think the humanality of everybody can relate to being a 13-year-old, 16-year-old, how vulnerable you are.
Yeah.
How some of us have made poor decisions at that time. And I think it really sets the precedent for what that feels like. It's pretty wild, dude. It's like, I don't know a lot about it, but I am sitting here and you could hear how intrigued I am because I don't know. And I think that's a real thing that when we got together, company, and trying to fit, make sure you're a good fit and begin to agree to work together, I realized at least some portion of my end that like the world needs to know what this stuff is so we can know what it is. And being on this podcast is a great place for a lot of people who maybe even non-law enforcement to hear some of the things we're out here trying to do. But anyway, go back to what you were saying. They hang out at metros. What do they do during the day?
Yeah, that's where pimps are going to go. That's the pimp recruiting ground. And now the pimp recruiting ground is the internet. Mm-hmm. I use my fishing analogy. So a pimp can go to the shopping mall. It's a small pond with a couple fish, or they can go to the metro and hang out at a small pond.
Is that's still a tactic that's used?
Yeah, because they'll still go there. It's not as much anymore because now they're using the internet, because the internet is an ocean full of fish, and these kids are stupid, man. They don't put their shit on private. You can go in there and look at their pictures, read their walls. And that's exactly what the pimps do, because the pimps understand the mind. They understand what's going on up here and they're looking for low self-esteem, kids who are down on themselves, and runaways, and they're looking for those types of kids.
Situations, right? I think about these girls who run away, and I have, I look back on my law enforcement career and I think about the times that I probably could have been a lot more empathetic and sympathetic, and I was just untrained and overall, to paint it with a broad brush, untrained. Well, and to have, I tell people in class, I used to talk about a paradigm shifts and seeing things differently. I go, a lot of us deal with these juveniles who are constant runaways, but what we don't know is the other side of things, what's actually going on behind the scenes that you're not accounting for. Maybe the option to run away is better than the option of her waking up every morning and having her uncle raping her up the butt in the morning. Maybe it's better than catching a fucking beating from your drunk alcoholic father or mother for a half an hour every day and have to wear long clothes to cover up bruises. So like we're so quick to judge at times as human beings and as law enforcement, because you get to that whole realm of like toxic. We try to make, it's not intentional, but I guess some of the human psyche to deal with some of the trauma that we see is to make light of situations and kind of brush things off because we're overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that we have to do. But I want to remind everybody, like, when you see somebody acting this way, namely a juvenile, there's a reason why. There's a reason why a kid is fucked up. Kids aren't just fucked up. They're just not. So
yeah, I know. I like to say like the highlight of my training, of the time that you spend in my class. I hope the highlight that the most you come away with is my block on missing kids. And I dig deep into the weeds, and I know how I used to be in patrol. When I was in patrol, there was 3 calls I hated. I hated the burglary that occurred earlier. That meant you've been out of service all day doing bullshit. I hated the kid with the BB gun shooting car windows up and down the street. And now you got to take 50 police reports. And the other one I hated was the return runaway. And because the tools weren't in my toolbox as a patrol officer, I did not realize, and I know now that I wish I knew then what I know now, because I can reflect back in my mind. I know that I sat down with human trafficking victims in front of my face, and I look at them, and I said to myself, you're a pain in the ass. You're a runaway. You do it all the time. Your parents are pieces of shit. They can't control you. I'm wasting my time. I should be out there helping people, locking people up, and I got to deal with you. And I wish I could go back, because you hit the nail on the head, Dennis. These kids are running from something or to something. There is nothing glamorous about running away and being on the street and having to give a blowjob so you can go get something to eat, or doing something that you don't normally wouldn't do just to survive. They run from something to something. The statistics based on what all the girls that I've interviewed, hundreds and hundreds of girls that are involved in sex trafficking, or in not so much sex trafficking, but even in sex work and prostitution. I would say that 90 to 95% of